you very much, and it's a real pleasure to be able to join you this afternoon and take you through the Charter. It was also great to see the other presentations that you've been having through the day and the discussions that you'll be joining in on, and that's really important because the white paper was very much built on discussions with residents in social housing. And it's obviously really grounded in, sadly, what happened at Grenfell in 2017. But that is important for why the white paper is set up as it is and why it is focused on the issues that it has set out. And that's because when the public inquiry was set for Grenfell, it was agreed that a wider piece of work needed to be done to look at the other issues that were being raised. And it was agreed then that ministers would look at those concerns and particularly the relationship between landlords and tenants. So we began this journey towards the white paper by holding events all around the country, taking ministers around to talk to people who live in social housing, to talk to landlords, local authorities and housing associations, really asking what concerned them. And we didn't write anything down for the Green Paper until we had done that listening. So what was in the Green Paper and what has shaped the White Paper really comes out of those discussions back then. We published the Green Paper in August 2018 and did another round of consultation events discussing with residents around the country again on what was in the Green Paper and what their views were. And we have looked at the views that have come in since then in shaping the White Paper. So it has been a long journey, but in the election at this time last year, there was a commitment in the Conservative manifesto to publish a social housing white paper. There had been some debate about how the follow-up to the Green Paper should be done, but that was what Conservative politicians committed to, and obviously what we have now driven as they are in government. In terms of shaping the white paper as well, we have also sought where we can to look at the issues that have been raised by COVID-19 and the pandemic. So we have tried to reflect that in parts of the paper where we can. And what the white paper does is to deliver a major programme of regulatory reform. We set out in the Green Paper to look at that relationship between landlord and tenant and was it right? So that is really what the White Paper focuses on. As well as regulation, it really looks at redress. It looks at the quality of social homes and neighbourhoods, but importantly also how tenants can have their voice heard more clearly. And we know that the last few period has been challenging for everyone. And as I said, that's why we have wanted to try and begin to reflect some of the challenges that have been emerging as a result of the pandemic. So the white paper is set out as a charter. We've, I think, already heard from the National Housing Federation about their charter on Together with Tenants, which was really positive. So the charter for social housing residents in the white paper covers 7 areas, and I shall go through each of those in just a moment. But these are all areas around how we achieve that rebalancing between landlord and tenant, how we pick up and focus on openness and transparency, on being able to be heard, on residents really being put at the heart of the system. So what does that mean in reality? The first chapter is focusing on safety, as the Green Paper did back in August 2018. So what we are looking at in terms of focusing on safety is looking at what the system changes are, and you will get this throughout as we look at the white paper. This is very much about looking at the structural changes that we need to make in order for this to work effectively between landlord and tenant. So legislating to change the regulator's objectives to explicitly include safety, legislating to require social landlords to have a nominated person who has responsibility for complying with health and safety requirements in the organisation. So creating that line of accountability. But in terms of the structure, also making sure that the regulator can work effectively with the new building safety regulator as this is brought in on safety issues. So again, making the system work. We have, as well as the white paper, published some specific measures on looking at reviewing smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. And this is with the intention to put in the same legal protections for social tenants as we have for private tenants on smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. And we intend to follow that with a consultation on electrical safety, because again, there is regulation in place for private rented tenants, but not for social housing tenants. And overall, with these changes, we want to ensure that we create an environment where landlords engage really effectively with their residents on safety. So I think you will have heard or be hearing from our best practice group where residents have worked with landlords throughout the last year, testing approaches on practical ways of engaging around safety in buildings. Then the second chapter looked at actually how you know that these what is going on, looking at greater openness and transparency, so that it is easier to hold landlords to account for what is happening, but also easier for people to see what is going on in their own landlord compared with another landlord, or what should be expected. So we're proposing a set of tenant satisfaction measures, and the proposals are set out in the white paper. When we had the Green Paper conversations, we heard very much that actually there was a real desire for a simple set of measures that could be applied to all landlords, and for tenants to see sort of easily what really should be expected as a key minimum, and to be able to sort of compare and contrast if that was needed. So that is what the tenant satisfaction measures are aiming to do. We'll be introducing a new access to information scheme. So this is very similar to the freedom of information provisions that council tenants can use at the moment, but housing association tenants can't. So this will put a similar arrangement in place for housing association tenants. We'll be requiring landlords to provide information on how their income is spent. So again, this is about transparency and openness, so we can see how investment is being made. And just as we are looking for a nominated senior person on health and safety, we'll be also looking for a similar nominee on complying with the consumer standards. So again, there is that point of accountability and clarity on how that is being taken forward in the organisation. Chapter 3 is very much about ensuring that when things go wrong, they can be put right promptly and fairly. So we are already strengthening the resources available to the Housing Ombudsman and the powers that it can use to ensure that happens. We are also preparing a communications campaign that we will get underway very early next year, so that people will know where to go to complain and how to go about it. So this is not just putting the changes in place, but ensuring that people can really use those systems that are available to them. And we really want to see the decision times coming down for the Housing Ombudsman. You'll have heard from the Ombudsman today about their new complaints handling code and how they are taking that forward. These are all really important. When something has gone wrong, it needs to be resolved as quickly as possible. So we are looking at all aspects to make sure that that can be done. And so we have already put into the Building Safety Bill clauses to remove what's called the democratic filter, where at the moment residents need to wait for 8 weeks after finishing the landlord's process or going through something like an MP or a councillor in order to access the Ombudsman. We heard very much in the Green Paper process that was unnecessary and delaying for people who were really trying to deal with serious issues. So that is in train. And then chapter 4 is really the heart of the Green Paper. So what this seeks to do is to address those absolutely core issues about respect and stigma that were raised with us through the Green Paper discussions, and seek to transform the consumer role of the social housing regulator. So at the moment, the social housing regulator looks at economic regulation. It does look at consumer regulation, but not in the same way. So we are looking to remove the serious detriment test, which would enable the the social housing regulator to be more proactive in its regulation of the consumer standards. And alongside that, we will be introducing routine inspections of the largest landlords. And when we say the largest landlords, those landlords own 95% of all the housing association homes. So by doing those inspections, it very much covers most of the homes that are provided by housing associations, and this will include local authorities as well. As I said before, we will be looking to ensure that the regulator has specific objectives around safety and reviewing its consumer standards. We will give, through that legislation, new powers for the regulator to publish a code of practice on consumer standards, and strengthening the regulator's enforcement powers in tackling failing landlords. Significantly for councils, we will be looking at how the regulator can have a stronger role in the management of arm's length bodies and tenant management organisations. And to do this, we will obviously be looking to the regulator to set up a new function within its organisation It will need new skills on consumer regulation, but not only staff, it will also be looking at its board, and we'll be looking to it to set up an advisory committee to provide independent advice on how it does its consumer regulation and carry out this much strengthened role. So we also heard in the Green Paper discussions that it was really important to be heard. The ministerial engagement that we had throughout the Green Paper and the consultation on it was a really good start to some of that. And ministers in the White Paper have committed to that ongoing engagement. So we very much hope to get that underway, admittedly in slightly different circumstances from the face-to-face engagement that we did through the Green Paper while we are still in the pandemic. But we will look to get that underway in the best way that we can. There are also proposals in the Green Paper to empower residents by providing support to do that, and through the regulatory changes to look at the expectations that we will have on landlords in terms of their engagement, and making sure that this is not a tick box exercise by requiring landlords to continue to seek out the best practice in engaging with residents. And we will be looking at a review of the professionalisation of the sector. So actually what would really help in terms of qualifications and training, what would be relevant, and how that will also help to support and address some of the issues around stigma that people raised in being treated with courtesy and respect. Chapter 6 is where we look at focusing on a good quality home and neighbourhood to live in. There was much discussion throughout the Green Paper conversations about the Decent Home Standard and the need to review that. In the consultation, we heard very much from both landlords and residents the importance of looking again at the Decent Home Standard to make sure it could really work for the modern day. So we shall be looking at that and also seeing how we should consider improving neighbourhood and place. So the Decent Homes Review will be broader in its scope in terms of looking at those issues. We heard very much about the importance of tackling antisocial behaviour, and the government wants to provide clear guidance on how and where to access support in addressing those issues. And we shall also be looking at antisocial behaviour in the tenant satisfaction measures that I mentioned earlier. We will be taking forward some targeted work around the allocation of social housing. We've been doing an evidence collection exercise, and we will be publishing the results of that shortly. And that will really look at the relationship between local authorities and housing associations in helping councils to discharge their duties, how local authorities best work in addressing issues around homelessness, but also helping vulnerable people to navigate the allocation system. And as I said, we will also be doing that review of professionalisation to ensure that staff in services are best equipped to provide the right help and support, and in the right way across their services. Chapter 7, the final chapter, really brings together the announcements that we have made around building more social and affordable homes. So the launch recently of the Affordable Homes Programme, £11.5 billion to provide new homes for rent and for ownership. That there will be a new right to shared ownership, on which there is a consultation running. And we will also look to publish shortly the evaluation of the voluntary right to buy pilot. So that really kind of like rounds up the measures that we set out in the green paper. Our next steps. Immediately, we have obviously got running the consultation on smoke and carbon monoxide alarms. That is running until January the 11th. So please do take a look at that and send in your views if you would like to do that. We will see the Building Safety Bill, so that contains removing the democratic filter. That will start through Parliament. We will have the campaign underway to raise awareness on how to raise complaints. We will begin the Decent Homes Review. We will be looking for the timing for when we can bring forward the legislation that will particularly deliver the regulatory package that I have set out. And then we will be setting out how we will take forward the various reviews and measures that we set out in the paper, because this is a very significant delivery programme now that will take time and on which we will want to engage right across the sector with residents, with landlords and other interests to take forward and deliver the white paper.